All right, everybody. We have Mike Rogers talking about summer maintenance on black pines. Everybody, Mike Rogers.
So, pines are, they're not the easiest thing to grow, but you only work on them about 3 or 4 times a year. So most of the time they're just standing there on your bench, growing like mad, So some confusion about when to do what. So we're going to go through everything. When you get a pine, doesn't matter when you get it, before you start working on it, you need to make sure it's healthy. So I would, if I bought a pine, I would probably just leave it alone for a year. You start off with the maintenance of pines in January, February, March. Depending on how cold it is that year, back when we used to have a real winter, they would go really dormant, and you could repot them into the middle of March. The thing about repotting pines is that the best time to repot a pine is right when the roots are waking up, not when the roots are dormant. Now, if you're getting ready to repot your pine, pull it out of the pot. If all the roots are brown, those roots are still dormant. If it has little white root tips on there, those roots are waking up. So that's the perfect time to repot a pine. When you start getting those little white root tips on there, that'll be, depending on the temperature, January, February, the first couple of weeks of March. I have repotted them into April, but the way our winters are going now, April's out. You're going to have to get them done before April. That's the first thing you do with pines. You repot them. If you buy a pine, then I would kind of hold it until January, February of the next year and repot it, because you want to make sure that you have a good root system, that it's in good soil. I have bought trees that the people said, yeah, they're in good soil, and then 6 months later the tree's declining and you pull it out of the pot, and the good soil is only an inch deep. The rest of it's just muck. I bought a juniper, a shimpaku, a big one time, and it was in Georgia clay, which didn't work in Florida. It had about an inch of lava rock on the top, and I was told, oh yeah, that's all lava rock, Okay. So, first thing you do, you really need to have well-drained soil in the pot. Any good bonsai soil is good for pines. They just need to be well-drained and a mixture that holds water. Pines do not like to be bone dry. Well-drained soil. If you have any tree in a well-drained soil, this tree here, it's going to need to be repotted this January, because I put it in this pot, and I never bare root them, because you get rid of all the microrhizas when you bare root, and so this is going to need to be repotted this January. But as you can see, the tree is growing pretty good, so we're going to do some work on it. I brought this tree over here that Jason already mentioned. I've had that tree about 25 years, and the last few years it had beetle cast so bad, and it just kind of started declining. So this is a tree that you really don't want to do a lot of work to it. It's just now starting to come back. So I'm going to let it go another year before I start, taking all the candles off. Taking branches off is not part of summer maintenance. I just made a few suggestions and said, okay, so we're going to clean it up a little bit. So that cleans it up a little bit. So basically, let me get my scissors.
Why do you say that?
You don't want to do heavy pruning on a pine this time of the year because they tend to bleed. I just took off a couple of small branches, so it's not really going to hurt. But you know, if you got a big pine like this and did a whole styling on it, taking off branches, cutting part of the trunk down, it's probably going to bleed to death this time of the year. So most of that heavy work you want to do it in the wintertime when it's dormant. That way it's not going to bleed. But right now, if you do, you know, heavy work on this tree, it's going to bleed a lot. So basically, Japanese black pines are what we call a double flush pine. Basically, it's one of the few pines that we can grow down here that are good for bonsai. The other pines that they call single flush pines are the Japanese white pines and I think the Scots pines. Basically, trees that come from a cold area are single flush because they don't have time to, you know, to grow that much. They flush out, and like I was talking to Hugo Pines, I was talking to Walter Paul, he was here one time, and he said their growing season is 16 weeks in Germany.
Can you repeat your question? I didn't hear you.
His question was that when you get up, in, you know, up on New England and the higher elevations, everything is small. That's because of the adverse growing conditions. You know, it's packed with snow all the time, all the winter time. Probably, you know, 8 or 9 months of the year is probably covered with snow.
Can you take a tree like that and collect it and bring it down?
Some trees you can. Some of the junipers that they've been collecting out of the Sierra Nevadas, they do fine here. I imagine there's probably some that you can. I mean, I brought a hornbeam from Georgia. It was not the American hornbeam. It was a different hornbeam. I forget what it was. It didn't do well here at all. You know, the leaves were bigger, but it didn't like the heat. You know, of course it gets hot in Georgia, but it's, you know, not as long as it is here. And their nights are cooler. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
You know, different things, different places have cooler nights. Like California, the nights get cooler. It's like in the desert, you know, it can get near freezing at night at 105 in the daytime and near freezing at night. And some things like that, you know, when it's 100 degrees in the daytime here and, you know, 80, 81 at night, you know, some things just don't like that. So in January, February, March, you repot your tree, it's doing good. Pines, you do not have to repot them every year, but I would check because some pines grow more vigorous than others. So if it gets really pot bound in 1 year, then repot it. You know, like I said, people up north, you know, they get such a short growing season, they can go 5, 10 years without repotting a pine. And even black pines don't even do that well up there. They have to protect it from the cold. So that's your January task on pines is January, February repotting. That's the winter to spring. Now we're into summer. Around April, they start extending their candles, and that's when you start fertilizing pines. It's when the candles start extending, then you start fertilizing. And when you look at some of the pictures in Japan, you really have to subscribe to some of the different magazines, but they'll start out with half a dozen fertilizer cakes on there, and by every month they add a half a dozen. By August, you know, the whole surface of the soil is covered with cakes. You know, and their pines are just growing like gangbusters. So that's one of the things people here. They just don't use enough fertilizer.
Yeah.
So
Can I make a comment? These things seem to eat fertilizer. Some stuff, you know, doesn't feed real heavy, but these things here seem to feed as heavy as you want to put it on there. They just keep on going.
yeah. So So you start fertilizing around April when the candles start elongating. Now, what double flush means is that you can come in here, and what we're going to do is take all of this year's growth out. You can see what this year's growth is right there. In April, it looks like a green bean. None of the needles have elongated yet, but by now they're fully elongated, fully leafed out, and this is this year's growth. At that time, you also want to come in here and take some of the extra buds out. You really want everything, because where there's a bud, there's usually 5 or 6 buds. Every candle from this year you want to take out. Just an example over here where
Make it all up in your grill.
it's not going to be that.
So for those of you that can't see this, we'll have a video of it up shortly.
So basically, this branch here has all of the this year's candles cut off, and right at the end of the branch, you see that it's got multiple buds, and you really want to get it down to 2 at the end. And I generally come in here and all the needles that are growing underneath. And when I trim the candles, I usually come in here and shorten the needles with a pair of scissors. All right, this year, the whole purpose of doing this is for needle reduction. These needles would continue to elongate, and they may get 3 inches long by the end of the year. They start out in April and grow until October. So, the needles, the full-size needles are, can be 6 to 8 inches long. These are obviously reduced. They're probably at least more than half reduced already. So if you come in here and you take out in, say, July, all of this year's growth, this year's candles, then it has to put out another flush. That's what the double flush is. The black pines will put out a whole new set of candles. Now, it only has between now and October to flush out.
Okay.
So the needles, you get shorter candles and shorter needles. You don't really worry about this part of the maintenance on a pine until you start getting want to get ramification. If you got a pine growing in a nursery container that you're trying to grow a trunk on, you're not going to come in here and cut candles off of it. You want it to grow. Mm-hmm. Now, we're trying to make a bonsai out of this tree, and we're trying to get it, actually, we're weakening the tree. Instead of having 8-inch needles, we want it to have 2-inch needles. So we're actually weakening the tree by doing this. But that's why your tree has to be healthy when you start doing this. Because if the tree's not healthy, it's not going to do well. Because we are weakening the tree. So there's a big glomp up here. I'm just going to take this whole top out. You've got the next layer down, which has shorter internodes anyway, and it has 3 branches that you can actually deal with. So I've taken that candle out, so trimming the needles out. This is the same thing here. Pines grow in what we call whorls. As you go up the trunk, you'll have a bare spot, which is basically the internodes This is why when you start pines from seedlings, you want to, get rid of that central trunk right off the bat, and not have a single, that original trunk going up, because that original trunk, you have 4 inches of blank wood, and then you have branches growing out of the same spot all the way around. That's called a whorl, and most pines grow in that configuration. And that's why we took these 2 branches out, because it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 branches. This one over here is 6, but these were obnoxious branches. Eventually, I would probably even take this one out and regrow this little branch here. When you get more than 1 branch coming off the same spot in the trunk, it makes a bulge there. You get reverse taper. That's why opposing branches are not good. We don't make rules just to make rules. We make rules because they make sense, and that's a rule that makes sense, is that if you have more than 1 branch coming off the same spot in the trunk, it's going to get a bulge there, and it's going to make an ugly reverse taper. So as you're working your tree, you start working that down. So,
Mike, with those 2 that you cut off there, those are to become gin?
Yes, I left a nub there. That gives you a choice. If you want to make it a gin, you can. If you don't, you can go in there and cut it off later. This is the end of the branch. This was right on the top. Is one of this year's candles. It's got 3 others that are coming off the same spot. So when you're choosing, I'm going to take this one off too. So basically what you have is, now you have 2 branches that are coming out in a Y. That's really what you want all over this tree. You want each branch end to end in a Y, 2 little branches coming out. Now, when you're choosing, if you have five candles there, you basically, you're going to have to use your mind a little bit. You don't just, take the same 2 branches out all the time. Each branch is different. In the top of the tree, the top third of the tree, the branches are going to be more vigorous than the bottom third of your tree. So in the top, you would take the most vigorous buds out. The whole idea of maintenance on pines is to get the tree to growing the same all over from the top to the bottom. So when you wind up with the flushes in the fall, finishing off, you want the needles in the top of your tree to be the same length as the needles in the bottom of your tree. So you have to take more vigor out of the top and leave a little bit more vigor in the bottom. So in the top third of your tree, basically you would take the strongest buds out and leave the weakest ones, because the top is more vigorous. When you start working down, your next branch,
So you probably want to start at the top and work your way down.
start at the top, work your way down. Yeah. See, this is about the same here. The vigor really hasn't changed much, but you don't always have to leave the 2 buds right at the end. It could be a bud maybe coming off the side a little bit. A lot of people will take, if the 2 buds they keep coming off to the side a little bit, just put a little bit of wire on there and straighten it out so that all the buds are pointing out in the same direction. So basically, you still come in here and take out this year's candles. And so basically your summer maintenance is taking out this year's candles and selecting buds that you're going to let grow out again from now until fall. The buds that we're leaving, you'll see that you know, these are just buds here.
Can you show the difference between what's the bud?
You want two buds at the end of each branch.
So which are the buds and which are the...
Well, this is the candle that I just took off. So these buds back here, that's a bud right there. This is a bud, and this is a new bud coming out. So same here. I took all the candles out, so you've got buds down here, and you don't want buds coming off right at the top. Anything that grows straight up is going to be a lot more vigorous than things that are coming off to the side. So basically, see, I'm going to take that bud out right there. That gives these other buds a chance to grow out.
So can you explain about with taking the fertilizer off when you decandle?
Well, the whole idea is that once you decandle, you want it to grow slower. So a lot of people will take the fertilizer off when you decandle. Basically, you would fertilize from April till August, depending on the size of the tree and how short you want the needles. If you have a tree this size, I mean, 1-inch needles would be nice, but you're not going to get 1-inch needles on that. So basically, I would probably wait until the end of July, the 1st of August to cut the candles on that tree. That'll give it less time to develop the longer needles. So once you cut the candles, basically you're trying to weaken the tree anyway. So you pull the fertilizer off and not let it go back gangbusters on the new candles. That way they come in shorter. To do all of these methods, your tree has to be healthy. This tree is not really all that healthy. You see most of these buds back here are weak, and it had 2 strong ones, so I would probably go ahead and put new fertilizer on this tree. If your tree is really healthy, I mean, this tree here is pretty good, but she's still looking to get ramification on. She's still looking to get some development on this tree. So I'm just gonna come in here real quick and take some of.
Can you go to the other side so we can see it?
Basically, I'm just gonna take some of this year's growth out of this tree. And she's looking to still get some development out of this tree. So if you're looking to get development out of your tree, then I would probably put new fertilizer on it. What Jason's talking about is a tree that is finished, it's in a bonsai pot, and you're just maintaining that tree as a finished bonsai. And it's surprising, you know, once you decandle the whole tree, how much you actually take off. So now all of these branches need to be wired down.
Now, do you do that now?
And you can do that in June, July,
Yeah,
August.
you can do that. You know, you're not going to be putting heavy wire on there and bending the trunk, but you can wire these branches down. That goes along with your summer maintenance.
There's a lot of stuff on there.
I'm just going to thin that out a little bit. So summer maintenance is that you cut all your candles, this year's candles off, and get rid of all these bulbous multiple buds at the ends of your branches. So we You know, this was a pretty small tree, but you see how much we cut off of it.
We do a few things in the past besides.
We cut, we cut quite a bit off of that. There was there's a guy, what was his name? He worked for Brussels.
Joe Harris?
Joe Harris. You know, when he was at Brussels, we were sitting around drinking with him one night, and he said they had about 2,000 pines at the nursery where he was an apprentice in Japan, and they would have the lesser apprentices bring the pines in to this workshop, and they would have a table there, and they get about 2 or 3 of the more advanced apprentices cutting the candles off, and he said they would be waist deep in pine candles by the end of the day. So
would the other pine up there be healthy enough to?
this pine, yeah.
No, I mean the.
Your pine?
Yeah.
So one quick question on this, would this still get in the fertilizer basket?
I probably, you're looking for development on this tree, so I would probably fertilize it again. So Ben was asking about this tree, and
Hang on
in
one
my
second.
opinion, this tree is a little too weak
Yeah.
to go and cut all the candles off. So basically, I would leave this pine alone. I wouldn't even thin the needles. We're going to talk about thinning the needles in the fall next. I wouldn't even do that. I would probably pull it out of that pot and repot it, and I would put fertilizer back on this tree and let it, you know,
Not repot right now though.
not repot right
Right.
now. I would
Color
put
isn't
fertilizer
good.
on it.
Yeah, it doesn't have a
In the was it March or whenever, I think March, April, the wire was digging in, so I took the wire
Yeah.
off and I took a couple of the old like last year's needles, kind of like back here off. That was okay to do, right?
Yeah, that was fine.
Kind of thin it out.
Yeah.
Because last year's needles had never been taken off. They were
Yeah.
just kind of starting to brown. That would be like what you're going to talk about next.
Yes.
So Mike, you're saying that one's weak because the needles are so short?
The needles are short, doesn't have real good color. You really should have the darker green. I mean, this tree is starting to get healthy. As you can see that the needles are dark green. You know, this tree is, you know, kind of a light green.
Yeah.
So I would put, yeah, and that one's more dark over there. So I would put fertilizer back on this tree and, you know,
Repot in the
repot.
when I get back from college.
well, January, February, you pull it out and check the roots,
Yeah.
just like he said.
Because the year that I almost lost it, I did 2 things to it. Remember, I repotted it and I did work on it. And he said, and I was lucky to have, that's why there's a gin on one side, because I lost that side of the tree. And he said, he told me when we were
The
there.
year you repot, you don't
Yeah.
cut all the needles off.
Yeah, 1 insult per year
Yeah.
on pines. Yeah.
And I was like, oh. He's like, you were lucky that you.
The black pine that Mike's working on right now was repotted, I think, 2 years ago. So it's gotten a whole year to recover from, you know, now he can do this because it's got good roots on it because they get their strength from the roots. So it's got, he'll be able to cut that and it'll back bud like crazy.
But some pines, depending on the size of the tree, the size of the pot it's in, the vigor of the tree, you're going to have to repot them every year in Florida.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're repotting a tree every 3 years, then you have 2 years of development. But if you have to repot that tree every year, then you have to do all the other work. Otherwise, it's never going to be a bonsai. I mean, Louise has had pines that she's had to repot every year, and you still have to do the work because the pine's vigorous enough. You know, we're talking about, you know, some pines. Every tree's got different. You know, every tree is different. You know, they're all seedlings.
And she has like mom, I mean, she has to be perfect with her soil, with her fertilizing. I mean, her care is impeccable, but she has to be because there's no room for error with a mame-sized pine.
Yeah.
You forget to do one thing and it's going to collapse or at least set you back a couple years.
So that's what happened with that.
Yeah, you got to be on point with your care.
Pines do not take to neglect. So, we talked about repotting in the spring. Some people in this country think January, February is wintertime. You know, and I would say right as hot as it is, I would say the middle of March is the cutoff for repotting. So you need to get your repotting done January, February, first couple of weeks of March. Then with summer maintenance, it's taking this year's growth off, which is all the new candles, and he can finish this tree when he gets it home. I think we, improved it, opened it up a little bit.
You're gonna have to do all those lower branches. They all need to be done.
Unneeded branches. So the last thing is the fall maintenance, and then in the fall you want to go out, come in here and thin the needles. At the same time, you're going to thin the new buds that come out, so that when your new buds come out and start growing in the next following April, you're not going to have, they still will put out, 5 or 6 new buds at the end of each branch, so you have to thin those out again. We'll have to come in and demo thinning the needles, because, we thinned this out. You can see just by cutting all the new candles, thins this out and pulling the needles off the bottom. That thins it out, and trimming the needles to a uniform shape thins out that branch. In the fall, this tree will put out a whole new set of candles, and in the fall, this tree will be dense again. So the whole idea of thinning it in the fall is because now, right now the sun's right up there. In the wintertime, the sun's going to be back over there. There's not going to be any sun here, direct sun, in most of the places. In my yard, I have a row of big oak trees on the south side of my property, and the sun is below those, so I don't get any full sun during the wintertime on my property. So with the reduced light that you're going to get, pine trees produce a lot of shade, dense shade, if they're not thin. So the whole idea of thinning them in the fall is so letting the sun get into all these little buds down here. All these little buds you see that are coming out, if they're shaded out, they're going to die. So even in the wintertime, they need light so that they can pop in the spring. And if you don't thin them out in the fall, they're going to be shaded all winter. They're going to be dark because the sun's not going to be as bright. And all those little buds are going to die over the wintertime because they're not getting any light.
That's why you have to
whatsoever.
open up your graft, so it can get some sunlight, because
if it has
it's
a new
getting
bud
shaded out pretty
that's
good.
not getting any light, it's going to shed that new bud. It's not going to develop. The new buds need light to develop the oxygen that it takes for that bud to start growing. So the whole idea of thinning everything out in the fall is so that your new buds don't suffer over the reduced light in wintertime. Anybody have any questions about anything we said today?
Hey Mike, quick question.
Okay.
Once you have a tree that is refined, like I'm talking like kokufu refined, like nice pads, do these principles still apply to the same degree, or do you kind of just apply them as needed in those situations?
Even more.
Because I think I've killed pines by being systematic. And like I was telling Daryl, on a little pine like that, where you said the little candles were too weak to remove, I had a nice pine that I killed because I think I was applying those techniques across the board.
Well, that's what I said earlier. You have to use your head.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
If, we could cut all the new candles off that tree and it would die, but
It's experience. He says use your head, but he's been doing this 50 years. It's really a couple years of seeing how the pine grows.
If the tree is not vigorous enough to do what you want to do, then you don't do it.
Got it.
See, I was thinking because it has small candles that, wow, you know what I'm saying, that he's gotten the small candles, but what you're saying is this time of year, they should not be that small. They should be a lot bigger.
At least should be darker green, and your candles, I would say, should be a little longer than that.
It's not. Yeah, it's not only the length of the candle. It's not only the size of the needles. It's also the color.
Yeah.
It's also how good the drainage. I mean, it's everything.
So yeah, in January we'll bring it back. We'll take a look at it in the fall. I would put fertilizer on it. Get some ironite, you know, and put that on there.
See, I think when we worked on these in, when was it, February or some
Yeah.
point, when we did that, I think, like you're talking about sucking out, I think I put all the fertilizer baskets in, but they're all empty. I mean, they're all sucked out as far as fertilizer.
So with everything we've said here, all of these processes weaken the tree. So you don't want a tree in this, you know, this process 10 years, you know, 20 years, a tree's going to be weak and it's going to die. Every now and then you have to let trees grow, you know, just leave them alone. You can take it with the year you repot, you're not going to do all this. You know, if you have a tree that you don't have to repot but every 5 years, you could repot it, don't do anything to it, and don't do anything to it the following year. Let it get its vigor back, and then go back in there and start cutting candles and thinning needles and all that. You know, you just have to use your head with pines. You don't want, this is, and these are small trees, but this is this year's growth on this tree. So you see, I mean, you see what we were cutting off over there. This is what, you know, on this little tree, if this were in a 3-gallon pot, this thing could be this long, you know.
I mean, we have some out there that are like that.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, this is what you don't want, but every now and then, with a tree that's growing vigorously, every now and then you want the tree to regain its vigor, you know. So if you apply the bonsai techniques to a pine year after year after year for 15, 20 years, that tree is going to be so weak that it may take it 5 years to recover. So I would say at least every 5 years, you need to just give it a break, you know, even put it in a bigger pot.
So is that it for today?
That's it for me. If
All right,
you have any
guys.
questions, I'm going to turn the floor over to Kevin.
All right.